The Goat House is back. The NFL franchise tag window opens up today. I'm breaking down all the candidates you need to know, some predictions, and we'll talk about some potential tag and trade scenarios. Where could these guys land if they're tagged and traded? A lot to break down. Let's get started. We're going to talk about several players in this video, but on your screen right now are the big name tag candidates to watch, very possible options for the franchise tag. That includes Tee Higgins, Sam Darnold, and Trey Smith. All are also possible tag and trade options at the end of this video. We will circle back and talk about scenarios, which teams they can land on, what picks they would go for. But Tee Higgins, we are expecting to receive the franchise tag that will cost just over $26 million. It is his second tag. It's fully guaranteed. So the Bengals will then try to reach a long-term deal and an extension. I think Tee Higgins can be seeking more than that franchise tag number. If the Bengals and Tee Higgins cannot reach a deal, they could possibly trade him. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Sam Darnold, interesting situation for the Vikings. He's expected to cost $39 million or more, possibly more than 40, possibly more than 40, just over 41. Those official numbers will come out very soon, maybe next week, closer to the combine. But these are really good projections right now, accurate projections. At least $39 million for Sam Darnold. That is very, very expensive. There will be some tag and trade talks. If the Vikings just want Sam Darnold back, then they'll probably tag him and try to work on a long-term extension. I don't really feel they're dying to get him back, but I could be wrong on that. But we'll talk about the possible tag and trade here in a second. But Byron Murphy is another name to watch for the Vikings. We'll talk about him in a little bit as well. Trey Smith, $24 million plus, could be around $25 million. And I think he's a little bit more of a realistic option than people are talking about right now. Remember, the Chiefs tagged and traded L'Jarius Sneed last year and didn't really feel like they were going to sign him to a long-term extension. Maybe they tried on a cheaper deal since he didn't want it like expected. They trade him. Could be a similar situation here. So if I had to predict, I mean, everyone right now is predicting Tee Higgins, so it's not just me or anything. It's expected to happen. I'll predict a tag. Sam Darnold, I'm going to say not tagged unless the Vikings have a trade lined up, which is unlikely, or if they really want him back. They're dying to get him back, which is unlikely. There's no risk in having that $39 million, probably more, cap it. And Trey Smith, and we'll circle back to Darnold in just a second. Trey Smith, I'm going to predict tagged, and people are disagreeing. I could be wrong on that. I'm basically saying it because it should happen. I think the Chiefs should tag him, but people are saying it's unlikely. People think it makes no sense. I actually think it makes sense to tag Trey Smith and then try to get him on a bargain deal. Maybe he wants to stay, and because the Chiefs don't want to open up more holes on the offense line, but more likely he's going to want to be the highest paid guard or close to. So if that's the case, the Chiefs trade him off that tag. I don't think there's much risk in that, and I'll tell you why. I think the people are saying no shot. I think they look at the price point for offensive linemen. It's $24-25 million in that range, and they're going, that's way too much. The Chiefs don't have a ton of cap space. They can't afford to roll in free agency with that. But there's more factors to that. First, the Chiefs are going to have plenty of cap space. They're going to restructure Mahomes, whether they tag Trey Smith or not. It's going to be needed. They can work with Kelsey's contract as well, but Mahomes' restructure alone is going to free an insane, well over $30 million. So they could actually afford Trey Smith for a little bit, but why I think it'll get resolved soon, he won't just sit around on that tag with that cap hit for the Chiefs, is because there should be several takers via trade, because there are already I can confirm teams that are highly interested in free agency for Trey Smith, and there's other teams that I'm pretty confident will be interested, but the confirmed teams include teams like the Bears, the Titans with connections with Trey Smith, and I heard the Vikings are supposed to be very high on Trey Smith as well. And other teams I'm expecting, I mean, you can throw out teams like the Giants, the Seahawks, the Cardinals, maybe the Chargers, but some very ideal teams. So out of all those teams that will be interested in Trey Smith and will be just perfectly fine making him the highest paid guard in football or close to, somebody is going to be interested. I think multiple teams will be interested in trading a third-round pick, maybe a fourth-round pick is the offer, but that will become a bidding war where they can get a very early third-round pick, maybe a future pick tagged on along with that. And if they for some reason do not have a trade partner, then you just remove the tag. You can have him, maybe he agrees to a cheaper contract with you then, since there's no I just don't see there not being interest. So that's why it makes sense to me, a similar situation with L'Jarius Sneed. So let's circle back to Sam Darnold. You could say, why wouldn't the Vikings do the same thing? Tag him, trade him, get a good pick. Makes sense, but until it kind of doesn't, because why would teams there would have to be a trade lined up for them to take that risk and do it, because you don't want to sit there with a $39 million cap hit going into free agency. So why would a team like the Raiders be like, yeah, tag him because we'll trade for him? Why would they do that when he's going to be a free agent and they don't have to trade anything for him? They can just sign him. So I don't see that. I can see a team like the Titans or the Browns being interested via free agency. I don't see them trading, especially the Titans are trying to gain more picks, they've said. I don't see them trading for Sam Darnold. Raiders are the only team, we'll have a scenario at the end that I could see it, but they're not going to tell the Vikings right now. They're not going to have a trade lined up. So the Vikings don't want to roll into free agency with a whopping $39 million cap hit. And what the Vikings want, I mean, perfect world, they tag and trade him and it works out flawlessly. But if they can't trade him, they really, really want someone to sign him to a pricey deal, because they will get a future compensatory pick. So they don't want to risk that. They don't want to get greedy, tag him to try to trade him, not be able to trade him. Then he's released further down the line. And, where the compensatory formula isn't active anymore, isn't a thing anymore at a certain point in the offseason, or teams already filled the hole at quarterback. They're not interested anymore. Several factors. So it is way too risky for Minnesota to do it. The only way they would do it is if they somehow had a trade lined up, or they really want Sam Darnold back and they want to extend him, or they're good with playing him having him play on the tag. I don't think so, though. But Trey Smith, people will disagree with me, and it's kind of 50-50. I could see either way. I think it just makes sense for the Chiefs to tag him and try to trade him, because the several interested teams, somebody will give up a pick. I mean, they would get a third-round compensatory most likely next year, so they would probably have to get that back, this year, or would they take a fourth this year via trade? We'll see. We'll have some scenarios at the end, but we got to talk about some more guys first. Here are some tag candidates that I'm not expecting to get the tag, but they're worth talking about. Milton Williams, you're going to be over $23.5 million, which it's a little rich, but for a guy of his caliber, how he played this year, how he played in the Super Bowl, and where he's going to get to in his career, best football is ahead of him. It's not unreasonable. It's just the Eagles really don't believe in the tag too much there, so I'm not really counting on it. Osa Odighizuwa, his stock is going up. I heard he's going to get paid way more than everyone thinks, but do the Cowboys slap that tag on him? It's a little rich for them. They're a little bit of a hole. They'll restructure some contracts. Ronnie Stanley, it's somewhat reasonable, around $24-25 million, a little rich for a guy with durability concerns, but the Ravens need their left tackle. There's going to be interested teams in free agency if he's available, like the Chiefs, like the Rams. Possibly, I mainly look at the Chiefs, but I would believe the Ravens get him back. But he's an option, but typically teams don't tag these longtime veteran guys. Javon Holland, $18 million or more, could be up to around $19.5 million. The Dolphins didn't even tag Wilkins last year, so I wouldn't expect it from Holland, but an option there. It's a decent price range, a little rich. Trevon Moehrig of the Raiders, who is stock is up. His best football is ahead of him. It's a little rich, but he's a really good football player. And the Raiders, that could be a sneaky one. They can tag him and try to work a long-term deal out, but they can just sign him and re-sign him in free agency. But there's going to be a lot of teams interested in free agency, so maybe the Raiders don't want him to get there. And a couple corners, DJ Reed is worth pretty close to that number, but the Jets, have to make other moves for a quarterback, for offensive line, and they got a future contract coming for Sauce Gardner, their other corner, so it's a little unlikely. Carlton Davis, it's a little rich, but the Lions did like him when he was healthy. But these are guys that are certainly possible. I think it's a lower percentage chance. On this list, I'm mainly looking at, if the Eagles just don't franchise tag guys, so I would say Milton Williams, but Moehrig and Ronnie Stanley, but I'm not expecting these ones to happen. The tag is too expensive for these guys, in my opinion, but I would watch out for a couple of them, and we'll talk about a couple of these guys again when it comes to the transition tag in just a second. But Drew Dahlman is known as a big-time free agent. There's already teams lining up to be interested, I've heard. Teams like the Chicago Bears. The Falcons will definitely be interested, but it's going to cost over $23.5 million. That is way too much for a center. So people might bring him up. Do not expect this one, though, even though he's a really good football player and he might be the highest paid center in free agency when it's all said and done. Alaric Jackson, young left tackle of the Rams, pretty solid. The Rams could decide to get better, or they could just like Jackson in his upside. I think it's just a little too pricey for a guy that is just not worth $23.5 million there. Byron Murphy is a very interesting one, and we'll talk about him again when it comes to the transition tag, but his tag number is expected to be $19.5 million, around that range. Could be slightly less, could be a little bit more likely. And I've heard that the Vikings are more likely to use the tag on Byron Murphy, their corner, who had a ton of turnovers, created a ton of turnovers last year, use the tag on him over Sam Darnold. My issue is 19.5 in that range. That is a lot of money for a guy like Byron Murphy, who does spend some time in the slot. Those guys don't get paid a ton, but can play outside as well. I know important for their defense last year. It just seems like, but people are going to say, and it's already been reported, if they tag him, they're going to work on an extension. But my take on that is if you're Byron Murphy and you got hit with around the 19.5 million tag, and the Vikings are trying to extend you for your proper price range, which is, what is it? Even over 16 million is pushing it for me, but let's just say it's around there. Isn't Byron Murphy going to go, man, I want that fully guaranteed 19.5. Keep me on this tag. That's what I would do. I don't know. I know you want the security long term, some guys, but this is a lot more than what you're worth. So wouldn't you want to stay on that big? And it could even be over 20 million. There's some people that believe that number is going to be over 20 million, maybe 20.5, even around there. So Byron Murphy's going to be like, nope, declining that extension from you Vikings. I'm staying on the tag, and the Vikings are in a weird situation then. So even though it's being high, and we're going to talk about a more reasonable situation for Byron Murphy in a second, and a couple Eagles players just way too expensive. Zach Bond was an all-star for them this year, all-pro type player. Josh Sweat was that good of a player as well, but just really expensive from these guys. Maybe they'll try to re-sign them. Maybe they'll let them walk. They feel like they can replace them, but those numbers are just way too expensive for linebackers, and they're both different types of linebackers, but they're both categorized. I mean, Josh Sweat's listed as an outside linebacker for them. Maybe they would try to slap the DN tag on him, but then you'd have problems. Sweat would definitely dispute that. I mean, he's listed as an outside linebacker for the Eagles as they switched schemes a little bit recently with Vic Fangio. So I think these guys are too expensive, but again, one that's actually possible is Byron Murphy. Now on to the transition tag options. It's a little bit cheaper of a tag, but it works differently. If you franchise tag a player, he's yours for right now, right? No other team could try to sign him. They would have to trade for him off the tag, extend him. Transition tag, once free agency opens, another team could try to sign him, but then the current team has the right to match the offer and then can get him back. So and you don't get a pick for this. Some people get confused. You do not get draft picks if a team actually signs him off the transition tag. Those are tenders that work like that. So, or the exclusive franchise tag. So the reason for this is to kind of let another team do the groundwork and let the player know what he's worth, and then boom, hey, we can sign him that deal. We like that, or we don't. We get an idea of what he's worth. Byron Murphy, again, we just talked about. He's being talked about a lot as a very possible Vikings tag option, and we just talked about the regular franchise tag. To me, just being too expensive for a guy like Byron Murphy, even though he's a really good player, he had a really good year. That's top tier corner money. And the Vikings are going to have a hard time extending him off that, in my opinion. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. So the transition tag makes some sense to me. I'd actually watch out for that if they do not tag Darnold, because you can't tag two guys. So it's going to be around $16.5 million. Could be a little less. Could be a little bit more. The official numbers come out next week. So they'll sign him at that, and they'll try to work on an extension that'll be in that price range. Maybe a tiny bit less than $16.5 million. So if they reach that extension then before free agency, then another team can't try to sign him. But if he's still on transition tag, then other teams could try to sign him. I don't think anyone signs him to a deal that the Vikings will not match. So that's a much safer option for the Vikings. I would watch out for that. Alaric Jackson, we just talked about the franchise tag being a little too expensive, but left tackles, especially a guy that's got experience and some upside, could be worth that $21.5 million, and let the other teams. I think the Patriots will be interested. Some other teams like the Bears, Commanders could be interested as well, but I think the Patriots be highly interested. So do the Rams want to let them get the free agency? I've heard the Rams might want to better themselves there. Do they try to go for Ronnie Stanley? So $21.5 million around that range can make some sense. Back to Trey Smith. So a lot of people think the regular franchise tag is too expensive, too risky. I debated that. A lot of people said not happening with the regular franchise tag, but watch out for the transition tag. I don't think the transition tag makes some sense, because what's the point? You either want him or you don't. So if you get him on the transition tag, it's around $21.5 million, and then another team could come along and offer him a contract, around that range or more, and I get the sense the Chiefs won't match that. And what's the point then? And if no team tries to sign him, then he's on the transition tag for a full 21.5. That is the cap hit, and the Chiefs don't want that. They want to be able to spread it around. The only reason it makes sense is do that and then maybe you can reach an extension around this range. I guess that could happen, but it's either, I mean, to me, it's either you tag and trade him or you let him go. That's really what it is at this point. And then some sneaky ones, Paulson Adebo. It's going to be way too expensive for him on the regular tag, but could he get the transition tag around $16.5 million? Not really counting on it. And then Talanoa Hufanga of the 49ers. It's only around $15 million. It's going to be a little bit more than that. It's possible. Has the durability concerns with the 49ers to try to sign him long-term in free agency. So I'd say watch out for Byron Murphy. I think the Vikings could end up putting this transition tag on him and then perhaps extending him. But an interesting, what if all of a sudden the news comes out, they tagged Sam Darnold? It's going to be like, oh, are they going to trade this guy, or do they really want him back? And then Byron Murphy's going to be in free agency. It's going to be interesting then. So we will see. Let's talk about tag and trade scenarios. This isn't me predicting that this will happen, but we'll talk about the big three guys that could be tagged, may not be tagged, but could be tagged, and then could be traded if a long-term deal is not reached. So T. Higgins, the Bengals are going to tag him, it sounds like, and they really want to extend him. So maybe he's just on the Bengals still. But if he were to be traded, I'd watch out for the Patriots. Everyone knows that. Other teams as well, Commanders, teams like that. But I think it would make sense for the Bengals to be able to receive a second-round pick this year and then maybe a fourth-round pick next year. And remember, tag and trade never really is max value for the player. So to me, T. Higgins is probably worth a late first-round pick or a second round and then more than just a fourth next year. But a team has to trade for him and then extend them to some crazy deal, because if you're in a tag and trade scenario, they want a lot of money. So the value goes down a little bit, but it's still a very good receiver that a lot of teams would be after. So a second round this year, a fourth round next year makes some sense. The Bengals acquire some picks. The Patriots get their guy they really want. Maybe they won't be able to get because the Bengals could take them off the market and keep them. But that is the more likely trade scenario if it were to happen. But again, the Commanders, Panthers, Chargers, several teams could be interested in this as well. If for some reason Sam Darnold were tagged and traded, this is the more likely scenario in my opinion. I'm not expecting it to happen, but it would be the Raiders would be the team to watch. Other teams that could be interested, Titans and the Browns. I don't see those teams, especially the Titans, trading picks. I think the Titans want to get more picks, and there would be more of a player if they can sign him in free agency. The Raiders have a lot of picks. I would think a third-round pick here. It's an early one. The Raiders have 2 third-round picks, so the Vikings would get that. So they would get something out of nothing, really. But they would, if they let him walk in free agency, they would get a third-round pick next year. Could they get a little more than a third-round pick because he's a quarterback? He's the top free agency quarterback, possibly. But I think the Vikings would be desperate to kind of move off him on that $40 million or so franchise tag. So that would make sense. But a 2026 pick could be thrown in. The Vikings are dying to get more picks this year because they're limited on that. So the compensatory pick only helps them next year. The Raiders, I was predicting to be very highly interested in Sam Darnold, and now it's coming out that they will be. But they're not. That's the thing with the tag and trade here. They're not going to tell the Vikings, we're interested if you tag them. Why would they do that? Let them get the free agency, then you sign them. You don't have to trade a pick. So that's why maybe the tag is a little less likely. But if there was a tag and trade scenario, this is kind of the one I would be looking for here. And then for Trey Smith, I think the Chiefs can get an early third-round pick. They got a third-round pick for L'Jarius Sneed last year. Trey Smith holds a little bit more value. Again, at the beginning of this video, I said they should consider tag and trading him because there's several teams lined up in free agency. I don't think those teams would disappear. Maybe some of them if they have to trade for them. Team like the Bears, I already can confirm they'll be highly interested via free agency, so I think they could be interested to trade. Vikings have been confirmed, and the Titans as well. And I think there's going to be several other teams, Giants, Cardinals, Seahawks, maybe Chargers. I look for more of the right guard needy teams, so maybe not Commanders, Texans, but do they have the money? Do they want to trade a pick and spend a lot of money? But I think between the Bears, again, the most interested teams and there's going to be a new one, but that I know of right now are Bears, Titans, and Vikings. And I think out of some of those teams, again, the Giants would make a lot of sense as well, Cardinals as well. But some of those teams would have to be interested in trading. The Bears are pretty trade happy recently, so I could, and they have 2 second-round picks. I think it would cost a third-round pick, maybe a little more. I don't really see it. So that way the Chiefs get the pick this year. Titans probably would not be interested in trading because they want to gain more picks, but I think they really like Trey Smith. They got the Chiefs' assistant GM as their GM. And the Vikings are known to be interested. What if they it's a long shot, but tag and trade Darnold, like we talked about, got a third-round pick, and then turned around and traded that third-round pick in a tag and trade for Trey Smith. So that would be like, we didn't actually trade anything. I mean, they would love to have the picks. They're limited on this year. They basically traded Darnold to a different team, but for Trey Smith, that would be pretty cool. That would make sense for the Vikings, but a lot would have to happen. That's pretty tough. I mean, first they would have to tag Darnold, which we're not fully expecting, but somewhat possible. But the Bears should be players, and a guy like Trey Smith, they're looking to build up that offensive line, but he might just be, a lot of people believe he might just be available via free agency. That's definitely possible. I think it's 50-50. It's a flip of a coin to me when it comes to one of the tags or letting him get to free agency, but and we've talked about where he could go, and we talked about in this video too, in free agency. But if T. Higgins is tagged like we're expecting, Trey Smith shoots up to that top available free agent. You know, Godwin being up there. I like Javon Holland up there as well. Milton Williams, Ronnie Stanley, DJ Reed, the Jets corner. So these would be your top free agents. There's not a long list of great free agents, to be honest. There's some pretty good corners out there. Some decent D tackles at the top. There's not going to be a long list of winners from free agency. So it's going to be a battle. It's going to be interesting. Some guys could end up getting a little overpaid because they're in free agency at the right time. So it's going to be very fun. We have a bunch of free agency videos on the channel with a lot of fits. More of the predictions videos are coming. Combine videos are coming. We'll have grades throughout free agency, rapid fire videos, grading every single signing. It's going to be a lot of fun. I always have a blast with these videos. So join us, like, subscribe, turn notifications on. That's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.